The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble courtyard of the royal palace of Aldoria as servants hurried through their daily routines. Maria Santos, a young housekeeping assistant, noticed something unusual as she polished the ornate brass handles of the main entrance doors. Black fabric had been draped across the palace gates overnight, and the royal flag flew at half-mast against the crisp autumn sky. Maria had worked at the palace for 3 years, ever since her 18th birthday when her mother had secured her the position through a distant cousin who served in the royal kitchen. She knew the protocols, the traditions, and the subtle signs that indicated changes in the royal household. The black draping and lowered flag could only mean one thing. Someone had died. But who? As Maria continued her work, she noticed other servants gathering in small groups, whispering among themselves. Their faces showed the same confusion she felt. Elena Vasquez, the head of housekeeping and Maria's supervisor, approached with her usual stern expression, but today it carried an undertone of bewilderment. "Maria, have you heard anything about whose funeral we are preparing for?" Elena asked in hushed tones, glancing around to ensure no palace guards were within earshot. "No, ma'am," Maria replied, setting down her polishing cloth. "I assumed you would know. Isn't there usually an announcement?" Elena shook her head slowly. "There should be. The protocol is clear. When a member of the royal family passes away, or even a close relative or high-ranking official, we receive detailed instructions about the mourning period, the funeral arrangements, and our specific duties. But this morning, all we received was a brief notice that the palace would observe a 3-day mourning period starting immediately." The mystery deepened as the day progressed. Carlos Mendez, the palace's head gardener for over 2 decades, encountered the same strange situation. He had been preparing the royal gardens for what he assumed would be a memorial service, but no one could tell him who they were, mourning, or what specific arrangements were needed. "In all my years here," Carlos confided to his assistant while trimming the rose bushes near the memorial garden, "I have never seen anything like this. Usually word spreads quickly through the palace staff. We know everything before the public does, but today it's as if the information is being deliberately withheld." Dr. Patricia Reeves, the palace physician, found herself in an equally puzzling situation. She had not been called to attend to any member of the royal family recently, and her medical records showed no recent deaths among the palace residents or regular visitors. As someone privy to the health status of the royal household, she should have been among the first to know if anyone had passed away. The royal family consisted of King Alfonso, Queen Isabella, their eldest son, Prince Miguel, who was heir to the throne, and their daughter, Princess Carmen. All 4 had been seen alive and well just 2 days prior during a public ceremony honoring the kingdom's military veterans. Dr. Reeves had conducted routine health checks on all family members within the past month, and everyone was in excellent health. James Morrison, the palace's chief of security, faced his own set of concerns. His team maintained detailed logs of everyone entering and leaving the palace grounds. There had been no emergency medical calls, no unusual activity, and no indication that anyone within the royal circle had fallen ill or suffered an accident. Yet the mourning protocols had been activated without any of the usual security measures that accompanied such events. "Something doesn't add up," James told his deputy during their morning briefing. "When the Queen's mother passed away 5 years ago, we had a complete security overhaul, media management protocols, and detailed schedules for the funeral proceedings. Today, I received a single memo stating that standard mourning procedures should be followed, but with no specifics about who, when, or why." The kitchen staff, led by Chef Antonio Rodriguez, encountered their own mysteries. Typically, during mourning periods, the kitchen would prepare specific meals that held ceremonial significance, and the dining schedules would be adjusted to accommodate prayer times and memorial services. However, Antonio received no such instructions. The royal family's meal requests remained unchanged, and no special dietary considerations were communicated. "It's very strange," Antonio mentioned to his sous chef while preparing the royal lunch. "When we mourned the death of the king's brother 3 years ago, we had specific instructions about traditional mourning foods, the timing of meals, and even the type of flowers to use as table decorations. Today, I'm cooking the same menu as any other Tuesday." As news of the mourning period reached the public through the official palace announcement, citizens of Aldoria began gathering outside the palace gates. Many brought flowers, candles, and handwritten condolence messages, but they too were confused about whom they were mourning. The official statement had been brief and vague. The royal palace of Aldoria announces a 3-day period of mourning. All flags will fly at half-mast, and the royal family requests privacy during this difficult time. Local news reporters arrived at the scene, hoping to gather more information, but palace officials remained unusually tight-lipped. Usually, the palace's public relations department would provide background information, historical context, and details about upcoming memorial services. Today, they offered only the same vague statement that had been released to the public. Rebecca Thompson, a journalist who had covered royal affairs for over 15 years, found herself stonewalled by sources who typically provided her with inside information. "I've never encountered anything like this," she told her editor over the phone while standing outside the palace gates. "My contacts inside the palace seem genuinely confused. It's not that they're being secretive, they simply don't know what's happening." The confusion extended to the palace's administrative staff. Secretary Margaret Williams, who managed the royal family's schedules and correspondence, had received no instructions to cancel appointments or reschedule events. The king's calendar remained full, with meetings planned for the remainder of the week. The Queen's charity engagements were still scheduled, and both Prince Miguel and Princess Carmen had commitments that hadn't been canceled. "If we're truly in mourning," Margaret thought to herself while reviewing the schedules, "shouldn't these activities be postponed? The protocol manual clearly states that during official mourning periods, all non-essential activities should be suspended." Father Michael O'Brien, the palace chaplain who typically led memorial services and provided spiritual guidance during times of grief, had received no requests for his services. He had not been asked to prepare a funeral mass, deliver a eulogy, or even provide counseling to the royal family. As someone who had served the palace for over a decade, he knew that his role during mourning periods was crucial. "I keep waiting for someone to contact me," Father O'Brien shared with his assistant. "Usually, I'm involved from the very beginning, helping plan memorial services and providing comfort to the grieving family. But today, it's as if my services aren't needed, which makes me wonder if anyone is actually grieving." The palace's medical staff, including nurses and specialists who regularly attended to the royal family, reported no recent deaths or medical emergencies. The funeral director, who typically handled royal burial arrangements, had received no contact from the palace. Even the florists, who provided flowers for memorial services, remained uninformed about any upcoming ceremonies. As the first day of the mysterious mourning period drew to a close, the palace staff, media, and public remained as confused as they had been that morning. The black draping continued to hang from the palace gates, the flag remained at half-mast, and the official silence persisted. No additional information had been released, no memorial services had been announced, and no member of the royal family had made a public statement. Maria Santos finished her shift that evening with the same questions that had plagued her all day. As she walked through the palace corridors one final time, she noticed that the atmosphere felt different from previous mourning periods. During past times of grief, the palace had carried a heavy, somber energy. Staff members spoke in whispers, moved more slowly, and their faces reflected genuine sadness. Today, however, the prevailing emotion was confusion rather than sorrow. The mystery had captured the attention of the entire kingdom. Social media buzzed with theories and speculation. Citizens called radio talk shows to discuss the unusual situation. The lack of information had created a vacuum that was quickly filled with rumors and wild theories. Some speculated that a distant relative of the royal family had passed away in another country. Others suggested that perhaps a beloved palace pet had died, though this seemed unlikely given the formal nature of the mourning declaration. More conspiracy-minded individuals wondered if something more sinister was happening behind the palace walls. As night fell over the palace of Aldoria, the questions remained unanswered. The black fabric still fluttered in the evening breeze, and the lowered flag stood as a silent testament to a grief that no one could identify or understand. Tomorrow would bring new attempts to solve the mystery, but for now, the palace held its secrets close, leaving everyone to wonder whose death was being mourned in the shadows of the royal residence. The second day of the mysterious mourning period began with even more questions than the first. Maria Santos arrived at work to find reporters camped outside the palace gates, their cameras pointed toward the black-draped entrance. The story had gained international attention overnight, with news outlets from neighboring countries sending correspondents to cover what was being called the mystery of Aldoria's silent grief. Inside the palace, tensions were rising among the staff. Rumors had begun circulating in the servants' quarters, each more outlandish than the last. Some whispered that the king had secretly divorced the queen. Others suggested that one of the royal children had been disowned. The most dramatic theory proposed that the royal family had discovered a long-lost relative who had recently died, explaining why the death was significant enough to warrant mourning, but unknown enough to maintain secrecy. Elena Vasquez called an emergency meeting with her housekeeping staff in the servants' common room. The space, usually filled with cheerful chatter during break times, now buzzed with anxious energy. Maids, cleaners, and maintenance workers gathered around Elena, hoping she might have answers. "I want to address the rumors that are spreading," Elena began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had managed palace staff for over 15 years. "I have spoken directly with the palace administrator, and he assures me that all members of the royal family are alive and well. Whatever we are mourning, it is not the death of King Alfonso, Queen Isabella, Prince Miguel, or Princess Carmen." A collective sigh of relief filled the room, but questions remained. If not the immediate royal family, then who? Elena continued. "However, I must stress that we are to maintain our professional duties and refrain from gossip. Whatever the reason for this mourning period, it is clearly a sensitive matter that requires discretion." Meanwhile, Dr. Patricia Reeves had taken it upon herself to conduct a thorough investigation. She reviewed her medical files, contacted colleagues who served other prominent families in the kingdom, and even reached out to hospitals in the capital city. Her conclusion was definitive. No one connected to the royal circle had died recently. "I've checked every possible angle," Dr. Reeves confided to James Morrison during an impromptu meeting in her office. "No deaths in the extended royal family, no deaths among palace staff, no deaths among close friends or advisors. From a medical standpoint, this mourning period has no basis that I can identify." James Morrison had been conducting his own investigation through security channels. His team had reviewed surveillance footage from the past week, examined visitor logs, and contacted security details from other royal residences. Nothing indicated any tragic event or emergency that would warrant a mourning period. "What's most puzzling," James explained to Dr. Reeves, "is that the order for mourning came directly from the king's private secretary, not from the king himself. Usually, such announcements are made personally by the monarch or at least carry his direct authorization. This came through administrative channels, which is highly unusual. The king's private secretary, David Harrison, had served the royal family for over 20 years. He was known for his meticulous attention to protocol and his unwavering loyalty to the crown. When approached by curious staff members, David maintained that he was simply following orders, but his own demeanor suggested confusion rather than certainty. Chef Antonio Rodriguez made an interesting discovery during lunch preparation. While reviewing the week's meal schedules, he noticed that the royal family's dining preferences had not changed to reflect a mourning period. During previous times of grief, meals typically became simpler, often consisting of traditional comfort foods that held cultural significance during periods of loss. "They're eating the same foods they enjoy any other week," Antonio observed to his kitchen staff. "The Queen still requests her morning fruit salad, the King still wants his coffee prepared with cream and honey, and the children are eating their regular meals. People in mourning don't usually maintain normal appetites or food preferences." The palace's communications department, responsible for managing media relations and public announcements, found themselves in an unprecedented situation. Director Sarah Phillips had fielded over 200 calls from journalists, government officials, and concerned citizens, all seeking clarification about the mourning period. "I have never been in a position where I cannot provide basic information to the press," Sarah admitted to her assistant, while reviewing the growing stack of media requests. "Typically, we have detailed press packets prepared for any royal announcements, complete with background information, photographs, and scheduled press conferences. Today, I have nothing to offer beyond the original two-sentence statement." The situation became even more peculiar when foreign diplomats began making inquiries. The ambassadors from neighboring kingdoms, who maintained close relationships with Aldoria's royal family, contacted the palace seeking information about whom to send condolences to and whether their monarchs should attend any memorial services. Ambassador Catherine Laurent from the nearby kingdom of Valdres called the palace directly, speaking with the chief of protocol. "We are prepared to send flowers, offer our condolences, and arrange for King Philippe to attend funeral services if appropriate," she explained. "However, we need to know who has passed away so we can respond appropriately." The chief of protocol, Thomas Anderson, found himself in the embarrassing position of admitting that he did not have that information. In 30 years of diplomatic service, he had never encountered such a situation. As the day progressed, some staff members began to notice subtle changes in the royal family's behavior. Maria Santos, while cleaning the Queen's private sitting room, observed that Queen Isabella seemed more contemplative than usual. She sat by the window for longer periods, staring out at the gardens with a distant expression that Maria had not seen before. Prince Miguel was spotted by the palace groundskeeper walking alone in the memorial garden, an area typically reserved for honoring deceased members of the royal family. He spent nearly an hour among the stone monuments and flower beds, sometimes pausing to read inscriptions on memorial plaques. Princess Carmen, according to her personal attendant, had been asking unusual questions about family history. She had requested access to genealogical records and had spent considerable time in the palace library, researching the family tree and reading about relatives from previous generations. These observations led to a new theory among the palace staff. Perhaps the royal family had discovered something significant about their heritage that warranted a period of reflection and mourning. This theory gained traction when the palace librarian revealed that several historical documents and family records had been requested for review over the past week. Father Michael O'Brien decided to take a direct approach. He requested a private meeting with King Alfonso, hoping to offer spiritual guidance and perhaps gain insight into the situation. The meeting was granted, which surprised Father O'Brien, since he had expected his request to be declined if the royal family was truly dealing with private grief. The meeting took place in the king's private study, a room filled with books, family photographs, and personal mementos. King Alfonso appeared tired, but not devastated, thoughtful, but not deeply sorrowful. Father O'Brien approached the conversation carefully. "Your Majesty," Father O'Brien began, "I wanted to offer my services during this difficult time. If you or your family need spiritual counsel or comfort, I am here to help." King Alfonso looked at the priest with an expression that was difficult to read. "Thank you, Father," he replied slowly. "Your offer is appreciated. This is indeed a complex situation that requires careful consideration." The king's response was polite but vague, offering no specific information about what was being mourned. Father O'Brien left the meeting with the impression that the king was being truthful about there being a situation that required thought and reflection, but it did not seem to be traditional grief over a recent death. By evening, the mystery had attracted attention from international media. News networks in distant countries were covering the story, with royal correspondents speculating about possible explanations. Social media had exploded with theories, memes, and conspiracy discussions. The hashtag #MysteryMourning was trending globally. Local citizens had begun organizing their own investigations. Amateur genealogists researched the royal family tree, looking for recently deceased relatives who might explain the mourning period. History enthusiasts examined significant dates in the kingdom's past, wondering if the mourning might be commemorating a historical tragedy that had been overlooked in previous years. The economic impact was becoming noticeable. Tourist bookings to visit the kingdom had increased dramatically, with people hoping to witness the mysterious mourning period firsthand. Souvenir shops near the palace reported unusual sales of black ribbons and mourning flowers, despite no one knowing what they were mourning. Security concerns were also mounting. The large crowds gathering outside the palace gates required additional police presence. While most visitors were peaceful and respectful, the lack of information had created an atmosphere of uncertainty that worried law enforcement officials. As the second day of mourning concluded, the palace remained shrouded in mystery. The black draping still hung from the gates, the flag continued to fly at half-mast, and the official silence persisted. However, careful observers had begun to piece together subtle clues from the royal family's behavior, the unusual administrative channels through which the mourning order had come, and the specific timing of when the announcement had been made. Tomorrow would bring new developments, as pressure mounted from both domestic and international sources for an explanation. The mystery that had begun as a simple confusion among palace staff had evolved into a global phenomenon that demanded resolution. The third and final day of the mysterious mourning period dawned with unprecedented media attention focused on the Palace of Aldoria. International news crews had established a temporary broadcast village outside the palace gates, and government officials from multiple countries had quietly reached out to Aldoria's foreign ministry, seeking clarification about the unusual situation. Inside the palace, the pressure for answers had reached a breaking point. Palace staff, who had maintained their professional composure for 2 days, were beginning to show signs of stress and confusion. The normal rhythm of royal household operations had been disrupted by the constant speculation and the inability to perform their duties with their usual precision and confidence. Maria Santos began her shift with a sense that something would change today. The atmosphere in the palace felt different, charged with an anticipation that had been building since the mysterious mourning period began. As she went about her morning cleaning duties, she noticed increased activity in areas of the palace that were typically quiet during morning hours. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Princess Carmen, the younger of the royal children, approached Elena Vasquez with a request that would finally begin to unravel the mystery. "Mrs. Vasquez," Princess Carmen said, finding the head of housekeeping in the main corridor, "could you please ensure that the portrait gallery is thoroughly cleaned today? We will be receiving some important visitors this afternoon, and I want everything to look perfect." Elena was puzzled by the request. The portrait gallery, which housed paintings of royal family members dating back several centuries, was always maintained in pristine condition. Moreover, no visitors had been scheduled during the mourning period. "Of course, Your Highness," Elena replied. "May I ask which portraits require special attention?" Princess Carmen hesitated for a moment before responding. "Please give particular care to the portraits in the historical section, especially those from the 1800s. We want to honor our ancestors properly." This conversation provided the first real clue about the nature of the mourning period. Elena immediately shared the information with other senior staff members, and pieces of the puzzle began falling into place. Dr. Patricia Reeves remembered that several weeks earlier, Princess Carmen had asked her about genetic research and family medical histories. At the time, Dr. Reeves had assumed it was for a school project or personal curiosity. Now she wondered if the princess had been researching something more significant. James Morrison recalled that the palace library had received several requests for historical documents and genealogical records over the past month. The requests had come through proper channels and seemed routine at the time, but now they took on new significance. Father Michael O'Brien realized that his conversation with King Alfonso the previous day had contained subtle clues. The king had mentioned careful consideration and had seemed thoughtful rather than grief-stricken. Perhaps the mourning period was not about a recent death at all, but about something discovered from the past. The mystery began to unravel when Thomas Anderson, the chief of protocol, received an urgent call from the palace archives. The senior archivist, Dr. Elizabeth Harper, had been working with the royal family for the past month on a genealogical research project. She had made a discovery that explained everything. Dr. Harper requested an immediate meeting with the senior palace staff. In a conference room that had witnessed many important discussions over the years, she finally provided the answers that everyone had been seeking. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Harper began, spreading several old documents and photographs on the conference table. "I can now explain the reason for our current mourning period. 3 weeks ago, Princess Carmen approached me with questions about a family story she had heard from her grandmother before the elderly Queen Mother passed away several years ago." The room fell silent as Dr. Harper continued her explanation. "According to family legend, there was a royal child born in 1847 who disappeared under mysterious circumstances. The official records stated that the infant had died, but the Queen Mother had always believed there was more to the story. Princess Carmen asked me to investigate." Dr. Harper pointed to an old birth certificate and several correspondence letters. After extensive research through church records, hospital documents, and private family papers, we discovered that Prince Eduardo, born on October 15, 1847, did not die as officially recorded. Instead, he was secretly given away for adoption due to a palace scandal involving his parentage. The revelation sent shockwaves through the room. A hidden royal child from over 175 years ago had been discovered through modern genealogical research. "But there's more," Dr. Harper continued. "Through DNA analysis of preserved family artifacts and modern genealogical databases, we have traced Prince Eduardo's lineage. He lived a full life under an assumed name, married, had children, and established a family line that continues to this day." James Morrison leaned forward in his chair. "Are you saying that there are living descendants of this lost prince?" "Exactly," Dr. Harper confirmed. "We have located 7 living individuals who are direct descendants of Prince Eduardo, making them legitimate members of the royal bloodline. They have been living ordinary lives, completely unaware of their royal heritage." The implications were staggering. The discovery meant that the royal family had unknowingly excluded legitimate relatives for over a century and a half. It also raised questions about inheritance rights, titles, and the moral obligation to acknowledge these newly discovered family members. Elena Vasquez understood now why Princess Carmen had requested special attention for the portrait gallery. Are these descendants going to be officially recognized? Dr. Harper nodded. King Alfonso and Queen Isabella have spent the past 3 weeks grappling with this discovery. They decided that the situation warranted a formal period of mourning for the injustice done to Prince Eduardo and his descendants. The mourning period represents grief for the family separation that occurred so long ago and acknowledgement of the wrongs that need to be made right. Thomas Anderson, with his extensive experience in royal protocol, immediately grasped the complexity of the situation. This explains why the mourning order came through administrative channels rather than from the king directly. His Majesty needed time to determine the proper way to handle such an unprecedented situation. Dr. Patricia Reeves realized that the royal family's behavior over the past few days now made perfect sense. They had been preparing for one of the most significant announcements in the kingdom's modern history. The contemplative moods, the research into family history, and the careful consideration of how to proceed all aligned with the magnitude of the discovery. Father Michael O'Brien felt a sense of relief that his spiritual intuition had been correct. The king had not been grieving a recent death, but rather wrestling with a profound moral and ethical decision about how to address a historical injustice. As the staff absorbed this information, Dr. Harper provided additional details about the descendants who had been located. They included a retired teacher, a small business owner, a nurse, a carpenter, an artist, a farmer, and a college student. All lived modest lives and had no knowledge of their royal connection. The family has decided to officially acknowledge these descendants and offer them recognition as members of the royal bloodline, Dr. Harper explained. However, this comes with no obligations and no automatic claims to titles or inheritance. It is simply an acknowledgement of their rightful place in the family tree and an invitation to be part of the royal family if they choose. The afternoon brought the promised visitors that Princess Carmen had mentioned. The 7 descendants, who had been contacted over the past week and gradually informed of their heritage, arrived at the palace for a private meeting with the royal family. Maria Santos, now understanding the true significance of the day, ensured that every surface in the portrait gallery gleamed. The space where these newly discovered relatives would walk among portraits of their ancestors needed to be perfect for this historic moment. The meeting between the official royal family and their newfound relatives was emotional and overwhelming. Generations of separation were bridged in a single afternoon as family stories were shared, resemblances were noted, and connections were made. That evening, King Alfonso addressed the nation in a televised broadcast that finally solved the mystery that had captivated the world. He explained the discovery of Prince Eduardo's fate, the successful tracing of his descendants, and the royal family's decision to acknowledge and welcome these relatives. "We have observed a period of mourning not for a recent death," the king explained to the nation, "but for a historical injustice that separated our family and denied rightful recognition to Prince Eduardo and his descendants. Today marks the end of that separation and the beginning of healing for our extended royal family." The announcement was met with worldwide fascination and approval. The story of the lost prince and his descendants captured public imagination in a way that few royal stories ever had. The mystery that had begun with confused palace staff and black draping had evolved into a tale of family reunion and historical justice. The mourning period officially ended that night, but its impact would last much longer. The royal family had gained 7 new members. The kingdom had gained a remarkable story of discovery and reconciliation, and the world had witnessed an unprecedented example of a monarchy taking responsibility for historical wrongs and working to make them right. Maria Santos removed the black draping from the palace gates the following morning, but she did so with a sense of pride rather than routine duty. She had been part of a historic moment, even if she had not understood it at the time. The flags were raised to full staff, normal palace operations resumed, and the newly expanded royal family began the process of getting to know one another. Some of the descendants chose to maintain their private lives with minimal royal involvement, while others embraced their newfound heritage more fully. The mystery of the palace mourning period became a symbol of how family secrets, even those buried for centuries, eventually find their way to light. It demonstrated the power of curiosity, careful research, and the courage to address historical injustices, even when doing so creates complex and unprecedented situations. In the end, what had begun as 3 days of confusion and speculation became one of the most meaningful and positive chapters in the modern history of the Kingdom of Aldoria.